Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, very good. My name is Jamie Rickman. I'm Community Engagement Manager for the City of Las Cruces. We really appreciate you joining us tonight and sharing your evening with us. You are here with the Las Cruces Town Hall meeting number 2 on cannabis, and we'll just go over a few housekeeping issues. First, if you haven't signed in, please make sure to sign in before you leave tonight so we can send you extra information. And then if you've picked up an agenda, the agenda has additional resources where you can find out more information on the topic, and then the next steps that we're going to be going through. Also, as for you to know, we are recording this meeting, so it is being recorded live now. It'll be live streamed as well, and so you can also see this recording later. We also have a survey that's available online and the resources here on your agenda. We will go through the program with a presentation. We'll have introductions and then the presentation, and then we will go to a question and answer session. And then we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to ask their questions, and we will make sure that everyone's questions are answered tonight. And then you'll also see me writing down some information as you're asking your questions. And we really must insist that when you're asking questions that you raise your hand and ask for a microphone, because Carla, who's in the back, she will be walking over the microphone to you so we can hear you. And it's really important because of the recording aspect of this, and so everybody will be able to hear. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce our Assistant City Manager, Mr. Ikani Tamapiao, and he will take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody, to the second town hall for cannabis here in the city of Las Cruces. Super excited to be here today. Just wanted to introduce staff, and then we'll give time to Mayor Pro Tem Gandara to speak. On my right here, I have Irene from Economic Development, also Larry Nichols from Community Development Director, Tim Pitts, our Deputy Community Development Director and Building Director. We also have Catherine Rogers, which you'll hear more from later today with planning. David Weir, also our planning director, and Cody Haber with fire. And Jamie Rickman, she is with community engagement, as well as Carla Walton in the back, community engagement. We have facilities here with Eric Martin also assisting, our PIO who's recording and also making sure this is happening with Mandy, as well as assistance. We also had a lot of team effort from our legal team as well, also assisting us, and just really a team effort here as we're trying to meet the timeline that the state has proposed of September 1st, accepting the production side of things, and so that's really why we're here on this condensed timeline. So I just want to introduce the team. I'll have Mayor Pro Tem, if you would like to come up, share a few words, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Ikani. Good evening, everybody. I'm Cassandra Gandara, Councilor for District 1. Welcome to my beautiful district. You're sitting in it. Thank you. I'm also Mayor Pro Tem. Very excited to see you all here today. This is important legislation for us. We, as council, we're very specific with staff, and I'm sorry my back is to you all, about wanting feedback from our community related to this. It's come once, a couple of weeks ago, this item to council and in the form of a work session, and we had a lot of questions and feedback specifically to the buffer zones and will we have buffer zones? If so, how many feet from, and should we have any, that kind of thing? And so I'm really interested in your feedback, and I'm happy to be here and see all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. All right, now we'll turn over the time to Catherine Rogers and Tim Pitts.
Good evening, everybody. I think some of you were here last time. I will go ahead and get started. We're specifically going to talk about some of the land use implications, zoning, the business registration processes, things of that nature tonight, just about where we're going so that you understand moving forward where these businesses may live and what you have to do in order to have these businesses become established. And so just a reminder, the Cannabis Control Division is being created by the Cannabis Regulation Act. This was part of that House Bill 2 that was approved by the state this past spring. They're in charge of the licensing and regulation components related to cannabis uses. The city itself will deal with things such as land use, business registrations, and making sure the building codes are being adhered to. Beginning of September, the CDD starts accepting applications for producers, micro businesses, and those licensed medical cannabis holders, and the city will start accepting business registrations for those same types of businesses. Beginning of January, of course, the server permits will be issued, commercial medical licenses will be issued, and then the CDD will start accepting all application types for licenses, and the city will also accept business registrations for all types of businesses. And then, of course, retail sales begin in April. Some land use implications, I'm just going to go through, if you're not familiar with what we're proposing, I'm going to talk about that right now. The act itself stated that the only thing that we really can do from a land use perspective is control the time, manner, and place, including the density of these types of businesses. We can't restrict the transportation, signage, operation, the relocation of existing medical cannabis uses, or prohibit personal use or production. So what we're proposing at the city level is to incorporate these into zones that kind of make sense from the same types of uses. So for example, cannabis retail. Those would be your typical dispensaries, things of that nature. We're proposing that those will be located in C1. We're recommending no consumption in that particular zone, and I'll explain that in a second. We're also proposing those in C2 and C3. Those are all of our commercial zones. Makes a lot of sense. No consumption in C1 is because we don't allow bars and taverns in that particular location. So for us, that was very similar. Cannabis industry, those are those manufacturing, those heavy uses related to sort of those more serious extractions, the cultivation, things of that nature. And we're proposing that those be located in our industrial zones. So that's our industrial standard zone, which is called M1, M2, and our more heavy industrial zone, which is M3. Research laboratories, we're proposing those also in industrial zones, including the technology zone. Something to note is we'd had some questions about, well, what about the testing laboratories? Well, we already have testing laboratories for all sorts of types of things in the city. There's already a category for that. And those are generally located in office or commercial zones. Cannabis microbusinesses, this is not to be confused with the exact definition that the state has. This is our definition. Those would be located in our single-family rural/agricultural zones, specifically EE, which is equestrian estate, and REM, which is rural estate mobile, with a special use permit. Because, of course, these may have some impacts to the neighborhoods because the primary use of these locations is always residential. It's not intended to be otherwise. So here's a map. We have also another copy of this map, I believe, located up front. But this just indicates the zones where these types of uses might be allowed. You can see the purples and the turquoise and the pinks and the greens are all the areas in the city where you might be able to find these types of commercial cannabis uses. Some conditions that I wanted to talk about, and these are the things that have been prompting the most feedback from both City Council, Planning and Zoning, as well as the community. And I'll talk about some of the options that we've come up for these. So all cannabis uses, we are requesting they be 300 feet from schools and daycares. That's the maximum allowed by the state. We're also requesting that cannabis retailers be 300 feet from residential zones, and this is how it's been proposed to Planning and Zoning. And again, I'm going to talk about some suggestions we might have moving forward. 1,000 feet from other cannabis retailers, and we're requesting that you could possibly obtain a special use permit if you wanted to be closer. Cannabis industries, you can have retail that is accessory to that. So if you were to have, let's say, a grow facility or a production facility that's in the West Mesa area, in our new Las Cruces Innovation Industrial Park, you could theoretically have some amount that's dedicated to walk-in customers to then obtain that product. Cannabis micro-business, again, this is our definition. We're requesting that with a special use permit, these be accessory to a primary residence, limited to no more than 200 mature plants. The product for sale must be produced on site, and it must be in a fully enclosed building and 100 feet from other residences. Some other use alternatives that I do want to share with everyone, because we've had a lot of questions about the state's defined micro-business, the vertically integrated micro-business, where those might be allowed with a little bit more leniency. We have something called the infill development process. We have an area, which is the core of the city, which is primarily to utilize vacant or underutilized properties in the town to make them viable in terms of the tax base, fill those up. It does require a public hearing before planning and zoning, but it's an entirely free process. Generally, that's something that's always supported by staff, and it really provides the leniency and the creativity to do some really interesting things underneath the premises of this infill development process. We also have something called a cottage industry. Now, a cottage industry is really intended for on-site production of a product that is then for sale at that same site. It is a use by right in all of our commercial zones and all of our industrial zones, and also in the North Mesquite and the South Mesquite overlay districts. It does limit the size of the retail that can be at that location, but in this case, because it's a use by right and it applies to like microbrews or maybe the small salsa manufacturer, those buffers don't apply because it's a general category. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Tim Pitts, Dr. Tim Pitts, who's going to talk about how to get the cannabis businesses registered in the city.
Can I ask a question quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. I'm just trying to learn, and we can talk about the different.
We're going to have question and answers after the presentation.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Tim Pitts again. I'm Deputy Director for Building and Development for the city. So, I thought after our last presentation at the first town hall that we found that there were a lot of people interested in actually opening businesses. So we thought we would today talk a little bit more to you as specific people wanting to open a business. What are you going to face when you come in? If you're more interested in the bigger issue of what Catherine was talking about, then we'll return a little bit to that a little later. But right now, this is really directed at those of you who want to open a business. What are you going to face? So I put together a little chart of how we are seeing the process, and we've spent a lot of time. We've met directly with Linda Trujillo with the Regulation and Licensing Division of the state. She's been very helpful to us, very, very open, and very answering a lot of our questions. And we expect that in the coming months and years that we'll be working out some of the issues that are going to come out. I can guarantee you there are going to be some. We don't yet know, for instance, who's going to be on staff with CCD here in Las Cruces, but we expect there's going to be at least 2 people, and we expect to be very closely related to their things. This is no different than we deal with the construction industry division with RLD. That is all the construction activity that happens in the state and the portion that happens here within the city that we're responsible for. And it's no different with the way we deal with tax and rev. We have very close relationships with all those state agencies. So as you're going through your process, keep that in mind, that we do our best to keep all of our processes working together. If they aren't, please come to me and I'll see if I can work it out, because we are very much wanting this to be a seamless process for you. As you know, your process, your application to the state is going to be a little bit different from what we're interested in. The city is not going to be reviewing your background check, is not going to be reviewing your finances, your organizational structure, all of those things. That's the state's responsibility. So what we're asking you to do is when you come to the city for the first time, you be prepared for whatever you're going to be submitting to the state. And have that package available to you so that you're not behind the 8 ball when you get going. I can guarantee you that if all you need is a business registration, you will have it a lot faster than the state can process you. So if you're not ready for the state, you're kind of jumping the gun coming to us. But at the same time, you don't want to wait until the state has approved you, until you do your things with the city. And that's in particularly true if you're building anything. And I want to point this out to you. We are enforcing the same laws, again, on cannabis manufacture and retail trade as we do on every single business that operates in the city of Las Cruces. We are here to protect the life safety, protect accessibility, making sure that everybody in the city of Las Cruces has the same opportunity to get into a building and participate. And we have a goal to produce sustainable structures that do not require repair and continual maintenance. We want to see things, and we want to find energy efficient buildings and buildings that conserve energy and so on. We enforce those rules on everybody. Don't think that you're getting singled out because you're doing cannabis. Every restaurant does it. Every manufacturer does it. And yes, I hear the same complaints from everybody. Oh, this is so grueling. But you know, it's not so grueling when the fire happens, and we've put the protections in place that stop your employees or your customers from dying. It's not such a bad thing when the guy in the wheelchair comes in and he's not going to sue you because you don't meet the ADA, because we've made sure that you are compliant with ADA and federal laws on accessibility. So just keep that in mind. It may seem daunting, especially if maybe you haven't operated in an above-board manner in the past, that this may seem a little, but it's the same thing we do for everybody. But we do have three sort of tracks here. You're going to deal with the state, you're going to deal with our building department if you're going to build anything. And if you're doing that, I'm going to recommend to you do that building permit first. I understand that you don't know what the state's going to say, and you might get burned. But the thing that's going to take you the longest out of this whole process is that building. And it's not going to be your permitting process, it's going to be your construction. So if you need to put in new electricity, if you need to put in new electrical lines, if you need to put in new security systems, if you need to put in a new HVAC system, if you need to put in some sort of structural supports or any sort of change, all of those things require a permit, all of those things require inspections, all of those things need to be done safely, effectively, efficiently. And so be prepared for that. And I'm going to recommend that be the first thing you do. If you're just moving into a space, everything's ready for you. I don't believe that's going to be true for almost anybody, because you got to have a security system, and guess what you have to do when you get a security system? You got to run wires, and wires have to be inspected. You have to put in an HVAC system. That's a mechanical system. We have to look at your ducting work, making sure you're not sending, let's say, carbon monoxide or something else back into a workspace. There's a lot of things that we're looking for, so just keep that in mind. Once you've done these things, and then third, apply for your tax and rev, get your business going, make sure that you are capable of paying taxes to the state of New Mexico. There's one single place you pay taxes in the state of New Mexico for business taxes, not property taxes, but that's tax and rev. All of city taxes are collected by tax and rev, and then they're sent to us. At that point, do your CCD application, get that thing going while you're doing your building or whatever else it is, complete your construction, get your certificate of occupancy, that's a C of O. If you have a C of O, from our perspective, from the building side, you're ready to occupy, and you'll be smooth sailing. If you're doing, and this is only going to be the case for a few people, if you're doing, let's say, a bakery, or you're doing a restaurant with cannabis-infused foods, or you're doing something, the health department is another one you're going to have to go through. Another agency we work with very regularly, but they will have their own rules and regulations. You're going to have to meet those to get through. Once you've done these two things, you've completed your construction, or if you don't have construction, you've assured that the building you're in doesn't need any sort of changes and you're ready to go, you can apply for your business registration with us, and we'll be ready to accept those. We have the ordinance going through, I think the 7th is when it's going to be in front of council. So we will be ready to accept the registrations on the 1st. The rules won't be finalized until the 7th, but we are confident that we will be ready by the time you get your CCD permit, that we will be, it's a little close, it's a little tight, a lot tighter than I wish it were. And we tried our best to get it done in time, and this is the part that we are discussing with CCD right now. How do we know that you have a license to operate? How do they know that we are saying you're good where you're at? And that is what the CCD has just introduced in their rules as of Friday, was the provisional approval letter. So what we're going to ask you to do is, when you get that, you're going to come to us with that, you're going to show us, we're going to say, here's your business registration, and I think the state is going to say, okay, bring your business registration back to us, and we will give you final approval. So that is the way we believe it's going to happen right now. This is after discussion with Mr. Trujillo, so it's not, this isn't just, we're not shooting from the hip, it's just, things changed on Friday, just to let you know, when they had their meeting at the CCD. And as I understand it, they had another meeting on Tuesday, and we don't know what they said at that one, because they didn't broadcast it, and we couldn't get someone to see it. So I'm going to have to go back and see if I can find a video of it, see if they had any changes to what they were doing. But that's our basic idea. That's how we're going to proceed. You know, you're welcome. Right across the hall here is going to be your main contact for the city. I got a great staff. They are very helpful. They're very nice and sweet, and they will help you through the process. So please don't come in and ask questions and so on when you need to. Just a few brief comments here. Again, health, safety, welfare, ADA compliance, that's what we're looking for. We look for that for everybody. Whatever you're doing, we will make sure that these things are met. Fire department will be one of our inspectors on these business registrations. They're going to do the last inspection before you open. So they're going to show up and they're going to say, yep, everything looks good, or they're going to say, oh, you can't do that. That's don't stack your stuff there. That's how people get out of the building in a fire, or something like that. So they're going to do the last inspection. And my understanding, and Cody, you can confirm this, you're able to schedule and perform those on the day of opening or the day before opening, as you do normally.
Cody Haver, Fire Marshal with the Las Cruces Fire Department, for the record. Dr. Pitts, that is true as long as it fits within all the other scheduled businesses that we have. So we typically do new business registrations up to 10 or 15 a week. I've got a staff of 4 inspectors. And so if we were to get, say, 10, 20, 30 registrations in a week, there would probably be a couple of weeks delay on that. And there's a couple more things I'm sure somebody will ask a question about that we can help that process along earlier in your permitting process, but I'll wait till that time.
Yeah. But you heard him. If you're opening your business, get with them, get it scheduled, get it on their calendar, and make sure that you're ready. You don't want to have your opening day, and this is true of every business, by the way. I can tell you that this is one of the things that throws people off. They put up their big grand opening sign, and everybody's all ready to come and see the thing, and then it's, have you had your inspection yet? No. Okay, we're going to do our best, and then but if you schedule it beforehand, please, more communication with us. We're really nice people. We won't bite you. Please come in and talk to us and get these things scheduled and ready to go. What else did I have here? We do have some resources. Again, you have your fire department here. These guys are very helpful. Again, you can contact them. The fire marshal's office and the fire inspectors they're very well aware of everything that you need to know about the fire code. And I find them very easy to work with. Police department has offered to us that they can come in and do pre-meetings with you to say, hey, do this, do that, this will help you out. Absolutely take advantage of that. Economic Development Department is ready to help you. And I can't ask more that you be prepared in your business plan. Again, you guys may not be familiar with putting that together. You might be, get a lawyer, get an accountant, talk to somebody that knows how to run a business and go out down to SCORE or somewhere like that and get some help in producing a business plan for you to be successful. We are not interested in you starting a business and closing in 3 months because I didn't know I needed to do that, So go ahead and ask us. And I think I'm getting told I need to hurry up. So this is what we're trying to stop, by the way, guys. This is what we don't want to have happen. That's why we have building codes. These are both from illegal cannabis manufacturers. We expect to see this. We expect to see this. We'd love to see this. If you can make your businesses look like these, we're going to think you're great, right? Make them pretty, make them attractive to the world. If we can get this, that means this will be a success, our whole effort here.
Thanks, Tim. I wanted to talk a little bit about the public engagement leading up into this point, and then kind of where we're going and what some of those recommendations and feedback and things of that nature are. So we've been hosting a public survey online. It is still open until the 15th, I believe, midnight. And so that's gone on for about a month now. We have had a couple of public meetings. We had on July 21st, a policy review committee in front of our economic development policy review committee. We had another one in front of quality of life on the 22nd. We had a previous town hall meeting on the 22nd. On the 26th, we had a city council work session to discuss all of these proposals. And then July 27th, we had Planning and Zoning Commission review the proposed code amendments and recommend approval to city council without modifications. So some of the feedback we've received both from council, from the public, and also from planning and zoning is that there have been some questions or concerns about the 1,000-foot distancing between the retail uses. We've also had some questions about the 300-foot buffer from residential zones. And then questions about the 300-foot buffer from schools and daycares. In particular, we've got places like downtown where you have a lot of mixed uses, including some schools and churches and what have you, really close to prime retail locations. We did hear from the Cannabis Chamber that supported a 600-foot or less between uses. We also wanted to point out that our alcohol uses or pharmacies aren't buffered either from each other or residential uses. Our zoning code does have use buffers, however. We do have them. It's not unheard of. We have them throughout the code. And something to note is that the state requires 300-foot buffers from schools, military, and churches for alcohol. We've also had some questions about consumption areas, specifically about informed consent for any sort of outdoor area for specifically the smoking or inhaled products. The act actually says that we may exclude consumption areas, but currently the city doesn't exclude alcohol consumption areas, such as bars or restaurants where alcohol is consumed. Further, we've had some questions about cottage industry and the cannabis use interpretation, whether that's going to be problematic in the future. As somebody who's been a land use planner for a really long time, it's very clear to me that the cottage industry does cover these types of uses. I don't find that it's murky at all. Some other comments had to do with overlays and including cannabis uses also in some specific overlays. Did want to talk about some other jurisdictions and how they're handling this, just for comparison's sake. Albuquerque is doing some similar types of provisions, allowing retail and commercial zones, cultivation and manufacturing in industrial zones. They have a 600-foot distancing rule between retail uses. They're requiring a CUP, which is equivalent to our SUP, which is a use permit that has to go through planning and zoning for approval, if closer or if any consumption was to occur at those retail uses. It is exempted for the micro businesses, however. In Farmington, they are proposing some pretty strict density regulations. They're limiting it to 1 dispensary retailer per every 2,000 residents, no cultivation in the city limits, also 300 feet from schools, and not allowed basically in the downtown. Roswell, again, some pretty strict rules. They're establishing some floating zones for cannabis. All cannabis uses require a conditional use permit. They're prohibited in several districts. They're requiring 300-foot buffer from a number of uses, and then they're requiring that all those businesses be a quarter mile from one another. Santa Fe's still trying to figure out what they want to do. They're folding these in temporarily to existing land uses, commercial, industrial, agriculture, things of that nature, and they're contemplating what to do in the future and how to incorporate that into their zones and whether or not they're going to consider additional buffers. So after hearing a lot of the feedback from the public, from council, from planning and zoning, some of the things that staff will be recommending to council, it's a part of the process means that we as staff have to take exactly what planning and zoning has recommended to council. So that means no modifications to what was already presented. However, during the discussion, we can bring up what we've heard. And so what we will be recommending during the meeting is that what we've heard is the 1,000-foot buffer may be too much. And so we're going to ask that council consider anywhere from that 600 to even eliminating it, so all the way to 0. Again, that's a policy decision. I'm going to leave that up to council to determine that. We've also considered some modifications to that 300-foot buffer from residences. So the recommendation, if council's amenable to it, is perhaps to consider that buffer just for consumption locations only. And then to also allow a special use permit to reduce that 300-foot buffer from schools or daycares in special circumstances, for example, the downtown. Some other things that we are asking that council consider is to limit consumption areas to indoors only, and then also to require a special use permit for any consumption area closer than 300 feet to a residential zone. Our next steps moving forward, we do have a meeting, I guess that's Monday, gosh, it goes fast, for what we call our first read, which is just bringing this ordinance forward to City Council for adoption. The adoption is actually September 7th. We're also anticipating maybe some formal code interpretations just to provide some levels of comfort to both staff and the public about cottage industries or any other types of retail uses, specifically in the downtown development code and the university district overlay. Those two, I won't go into super detail about those two codes, but those two codes are a little bit more form-based in nature, and so they're very generalized in the types of uses they cover. They're not very specific. Again, also draft additional cannabis regulations such as hours of operation, odor control, other operational components, nuisances, or other criminal or civil violations. That's something that belongs in a separate ordinance. It really isn't zoning and doesn't really belong there at this point in time. We're also going to ask City Council whether or not there are any other overlay amendments that perhaps need to take place as part of this. And then I do want to point out that we are well underway for a huge code rewrite called Realize Las Cruces. And so the ordinance changes that you see today, we will try to mimic or be as close to as we possibly can. But Realize Las Cruces is a whole rewrite of our development code. So it's going to look a little bit different, but the same categories will apply. And with that, I think we're ready for questions, unless Ikani has any last parting words.
No, I think we're good. Thank you very much, Catherine. And you're exactly right. We'll head into questions and answers. So the way we'll do this, I know there's some questions from the audience. We'll have Carla Walton with a floating mic. If you would like to just raise your hands and she'll come to you. And then the rest of the time will be for Q&A. After that, we'll adjourn. So the time is now yours, and we'll just have the panel respond.
Hi, my name is Cheryl. I actually have a couple of questions. The first one, when you talk about schools, could we define, is that K through 12, 300 feet away, or what is the designation there?
So our business registration process for schools, for daycares, because it actually does include daycares as well. It wasn't necessarily in the presentation. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear, but it's schools and daycares. The state has clear definitions for what those are, and so we'll be using those definitions. And those are captured during our business registration process. We know where all those locations are. Yeah, it is K through 12, and then daycares on top of that. So.
Okay, so that does not apply to any college, university campus. There's no location limitation.
Not that I'm aware of. I'm going to look to Ikani, but I don't believe so.
Okay. And then just out of concern for you guys and all of us that are looking at starting businesses, you're going to have a massive influx of license, and we need building inspectors. I know just from doing building outside of this, really big, influx that we're coming into this town. So do we have the people in place within the city that are going to be able to keep up with the needs that this legalization is going to generate?
Thank you, ma'am. Tim Pitts again. We are preparing for that, and I know City Council has already weighed in, at least informally. Councilor Gondra in particular has weighed in on this issue. So we're going to be weighing it and kind of feeling it out. Our expectation at this point is that we do not need extra staff, but Larry Nichols is our director, and I have been talking about alternatives for fast turnaround, should we need it. The problem is if we staff up and we don't need it, then we're wasting taxpayer money, and that's not a good thing either. I don't want to be the person that squanders the tax money I pay into the city either. So we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of it. Right now, we're anticipating, if, for instance, we were to get 200 business registrations in the first month, that's not a lot for us. So I'm not that worried about that. That would make for a rough month, but it wouldn't be a month that we would be overwhelmed. If I got 1,000, I think we would need to move quickly. If I got the number of people sitting in this room, we can handle it with our existing staff. But we are contemplating that, and so it's something that has been that's been thought about, and it's a good point. And as I say, it's been brought up by some city councilors and elsewhere. So.
And then just my last question, and I'll pass the microphone along. I know you guys have just been inundated and slammed with this incredible timeline that we're all on, and thank all of you for working overtime to come up with all the guidelines for all of us. Something that got said earlier concerns me as a business owner. Are there guidelines right now that we can follow? Because I'm nervous asking someone other than the fire marshal for guidance on me building out my property, my location, and then having the fire marshal, fire department come in and say, whoops, you got the wrong information. It's now going to cost you $6,000, $10,000 to redo what someone else told you could do. Are there guidelines we can follow? Can you give me some feedback or some information on that?
Thank you again, Tim Pitts. I can tell you what the problem you just mentioned is the problem every small businessman in general faces. Is do I have the right advice? Do I have the right counselors? Do I have the right consultants? And I would very much as staff, I think it's very difficult for us to recommend or say, yes, that's good, or that person's not good, or something. That person's not going to give you good advice. But what I can say is, and I think I can speak for the fire marshal's office, I think a lot of these questions, if you're uncertain, we would be happier to field as a email or a call than we would to tell you no later. And I certainly think that's the case for the building program, and that we have opportunities and for you to come in and ask some questions. And so if you're very nervous and you don't, but I would recommend it this way: get a good architect, get somebody that has a reputation and an ability to get work done, and get a good contractor. And right now, I'm telling you, you're going to have a hard time. It's just, this is not the time to start building things out. The construction industry is swamped and overwhelmed, and you're going to have a hard time getting wood. You're going to get a hard time getting steel. You're going to have a hard time getting wire. You're going to have a hard time. It's just, the industry is hammered. So I'm sorry for you in that situation. It's going to be hard to find a contractor that'll take the job. But do your due diligence, and then if you'd like to run a plan by us, I think we'd be willing to, and I think fire would be willing to consider that. I mean, obviously we can't give you a full plan review, but we could say, yeah, you're on the right track. We can.
And I did see a map pop up, and I know you guys were working on the final zoning. When is the final zoning going to be completed? Because I know there was a suggestion, because of the lumber shortage, labor shortage, COVID issues. What concerns me to say, you got to get building it now? That's a lot of money for so many people sitting in this room that are going to be facing really hard times 5 to 6 months from now if they are 2 blocks outside of the zoning. When will we get that information so we can make solid business decisions on?
I could turn it over to Connie, but I think that if you're okay, I'll answer it, that we have a counselor here who just heard what you had to say.
Okay.
And we are presenting the ordinance to them for consideration on starting on Monday, but we'll come back to them for consideration, discussion, amendment, and approval on September 7th. And so, as long as they can come to agreement and so on, and can vote on a final thing, but I think they know that there's a timeline. I think they all are very well aware, maybe more aware than I am, because they probably have heard from more constituents than I have of how important that is. And your concern and I'm very concerned about that for people too. I mean, I'm concerned about the CCD approval process and whether that's going to be able to meet the expectation that you're going to. I'd hate to see someone finish construction on, let's say September 20th. And not get CCD approval until December 1st. And you're sitting there with, what am I going to do? And by the way, this happened, and I think Connie could probably speak to this, happened in California in cases when he was there. It did happen elsewhere, and we're all, Ms. Trujillo up at CCD is aware of this too. And we are all working not to have that not happen to us. But I can't. We can't, I can't make these things happen. I can only do the best I can, that I'm not going to be the reason you couldn't get it done.
Well, thank you, because I know those were hard questions, and I just want you guys to know, we all understand. You're working so hard. You have been given an impossible job, and thank you for helping all of us.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jose Ramirez. My question is are we gonna have a program like the iPads where we scan IDs? So who purchases so many amounts of ounces and stuff like that? Or how is that gonna work? What program are we gonna use?
Tim Pitts, that's a CCD
Right.
issue, and that's going to be a consumption area issue. And right now, I don't know. I just have no idea.
Okay, so
And I don't know that they've discussed that yet.
Okay.
I know that they were concerned about getting the approval process for cannabis producers in particular down right now.
Right.
And I believe they're ready. They're gonna be able to do it, but their software isn't ready.
Right.
They're, so it's a close, I mean, as the lady said, it is a close one. And it was an ambitious expectation from the legislature for us, but as I think everyone up here will tell you, we don't back down from a challenge, and we will make sure we do what you guys need to make it work. But your specific question about that's really going to be a CCD question.
CCD.
And so when the CCD staff locally is hired, and I think that's where you're going to need to go with that question.
That's it.
Hi, my name is Shai. I've never run a business before, but I am going to be endeavoring to do so. The kind of business that I would like to open up is a cannabis consumption through food, so infusables. I'd like to do a restaurant that infuses everything from drinks to desserts to foods with cannabis and different kinds. Recently, I've come here from Washington State, where I have seen the cannabis production work and the different ways that you do that. What I'm inquiring about is, what are the steps that I, as a new business owner, am I gonna have to go through in a state that is just barely becoming legal in the cannabis market in order to start this new kind of business?
Again, Tim Pitts, yeah, again, I'm going to recommend that you get with the right professionals in that area. That I don't know that, my failed business 10 years ago is what you want to model yours on. but I know there's plenty of people that can help you. So I'd ask you to do that. But in terms of how you interface with us and what you're going to need to do, New Mexico is different from Washington, and that's the first thing you need to remember. This is not Texas, this is not Arizona, this is not Colorado, this is not Washington, this is not California. We have New Mexico rules. And so just keep that in mind. For restaurants, our perspective is we are very good at getting restaurants permitted, built, and open. We have no problem. How many of them have we done this week? A couple of them. Yours is just one that happens to use a different substance in it, and we aren't going to view it any differently. So if you have a restaurant, and by the way, this is a question, it's not to you, this isn't to you, but this is a question we got earlier by email. If you're doing this type of thing and it's being served in your restaurant, that is a retail use. That manufacture of the food products is ancillary to the retail use and can be done anywhere you can do the retail. If you're doing something that is packaged food that's going to be sent, distributed elsewhere, and is not served on site, that's a manufacturing use. That will be done as ancillary to a manufacturing process. And so we treat that as exactly the same way we treat, tortilla makers. Or anything else. So keep that in mind, that you're going to have to follow those rules. Restaurants are a tough one in New Mexico because you have multiple permitting sources. You've got us, and we will handle all life safety, egress, make sure you have the right parking, make sure you have the right accessibility, all that sort of stuff. But the health department will handle your food service permit and your health permit. And that is an agency of the state. It is not us. We have no say over what they want. Sometimes they ask for things that are different from what we tell you you need to do, and it can be a problem. So keep that in mind, and again, the earlier you can get those things done, the better off you're going to be. But we can get your restaurant open, but man, restaurants are a tough business.
I have a few other questions. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Another one was earlier they were mentioning zoning and the different types of zoning. So what would that fall under? Would that fall under like the cottaging, or you said retail, but I'm not exactly sure. Again, I've never run my own business before, so I'm trying to get all the information and all the knowledge I possibly can on making sure that I do this right the first time.
So sure, I can provide at least some guidance with zoning, and then we have Irene with our Economic Development Department. She might be able to speak to some small business resources, which are just any type of small business, not necessarily cannabis. But yeah, the way we envision, a bakery or a restaurant that's geared towards cannabis, it would fall in any of those commercial zones. If there's on-site consumption, you're going to want to look for a C2 or a C3 zoning designation, okay? So that's where you're gonna wanna start. And that's pretty typical of all the restaurants you see throughout town. But what I might recommend is if you're looking at vacant buildings, or you're looking at leasing something in a shopping center, or even building something, come to us and ask us, hey, does this zoning work? My staff already knows where we're placing these things, so they can provide some guidance. But that's really what you can do. We have something called a zoning verification letter, which basically is a formal letter from the city stating that this parcel in this zone will accommodate your use. And that's something that you'll probably want to get early as you move through this process. And I'm gonna look to Irene to see if she can answer something about small business assistance.
Sure, thank you. Irene Parra, Economic Development Department. And just to kind of reiterate what Tim Pitts was saying about handling this industry like a regular business, that's sort of how we're going to take a look at it too. If you're starting a business for the first time, there are some really basic things that we can work with you and provide resources and partner agencies to assist you with, things like writing a business plan, securing finance, taking a look at your marketing and advertising strategies, hiring, recruiting, and training. So we're happy to meet with you to take a look at what you have in mind and then provide you with the resources that you're going to need to be successful.
And the final bit of knowledge that I'm wondering is because of all the COVID that's going on and the recent help that they're getting in both restaurants and PLP, I think grants is what it's called. Because this is a cannabis geared restaurant that I'm wanting to open, is it going to fall under being able to be helped by these new regulations that have been put in place?
So Irene Parra, Economic Development Department. So in terms of securing financing to start your business, I think maybe that's your question. From what I understand right now, there are two banking institutions in New Mexico, I think they're both located in Albuquerque, that actually do currently work with cannabis businesses. Outside of that, it is difficult because it is still federally regulated. We can sit down to see what sort of resources you have available to you right now and then point you in the right direction.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sorry. My name is Dr. Ned Rubin. I'm the chair of the Unified Prevention Coalition of Doña Ana County, and I'm here this evening with Michelle Rincon, who's the program manager for prevention and community collaborations with the Center for Health Innovation. I'd like to raise another issue that I'm not aware that you've considered. At least I haven't heard about it in any of the conversations or the videos that I've looked at. I want to remind you that the mission of the Unified Prevention Coalition is to build collaboration around efforts to reduce or prevent youth, drug, and alcohol use and misuse. So what I'm talking about now is kids who are under 21. We want to address factors that increase risk of use and promote factors that increase resiliency. With that in mind, I want to remind you briefly about the results of the latest New Mexico Youth Risk and Resilience Survey, where we found that 25% of Doña Ana County youth in the 9th through 12th grade report using cannabis. It also reports that New Mexico has a higher rate of cannabis use before the age of 13 than any of the other 46 states that participate in this national survey. So as you said earlier, we are New Mexico and we have some unique things to consider. As a countywide substance misuse prevention organization focused on youth, the Unified Prevention Coalition wants to be very clear about our position with regard to cannabis business zoning and other related matters. Recent research reports that there are several things to consider based on the experience of other states that have legalized adult use cannabis. For example, the proximity to other similar retailers and the density of outlets for cannabis can influence negatively youth's decisions about substance use. So I'm not talking about the distance between schools or churches. I'm talking about the density of these outlets to each other. The number of retailers near schools and in residential areas around homes have been found to increase youth substance use. The proximity of these outlets contributes to a decrease in the perception of risk by these youth in cannabis use. So the denser these outlets are located and where kids are around, the less risk they perceive in the use of cannabis. This is a concern because the research on tobacco and alcohol shows that youth are more likely to smoke and drink when their home neighborhoods or their schools have a high density of these outlets. There's every reason to believe that this outcome would also occur with cannabis. Further, a study recently conducted in the Netherlands found that young people who live closer to cannabis outlets started using cannabis earlier than those who live further away from those outlets. So in the council's consideration and in your consideration of information that you present to the council, we urge you to consider these issues as you decide on zoning businesses that will sell cannabis. So this is issues regarding the density of locations relative to residential neighborhoods, schools, recreational facilities, but also hours and days of operation, how advertising is directed. All of these things can influence the way youth perceive cannabis. Another consideration that I don't know if you've discussed, is accidental poisonings that can occur. The city should consider implementing and supporting local cannabis retailers selling their products with tamper-proof or child-proof packaging. Remember, some of these products can look like candy or other things that are attractive to kids. In Arizona, the dispensaries charge $1 for reusable tamper-proof packaging that people who are purchasing the product can come back and reuse time and again as an additional safety measure. So this basic protection could prevent accidental exposure to cannabis products that are easily ingestible and have a high THC content. So I know that was a little more than 2 minutes. I apologize for that. But I wanted to make sure you are aware of our position with regard to the influence of this business on the kids who live in our community. Thank you.
Catherine, you want to speak to?
Hi, my name is Melissa. I wanted some clarification when you were talking about zoning. Are you talking about just Las Cruces or all areas in Doña Ana to include La Union, Chamberino, Mesquite, etc.?
To answer your question, it would just be within the city limits of Las Cruces because we do not have any jurisdiction outside of those limits. And so each of those individual jurisdictions would be responsible for their own ordinances, and then of course the county as well. And we've been in communications with several other communities about what they're doing, and so I think there will probably be some similar types of applications, but I can't speak for them in particular.
So
Thank you. If I may, I'll just, Tim Pitts, we did speak with the Community Development Director at Doñana County today, and they are looking, they're watching this meeting to see what we're going to do, and they will be watching September 7th to see what we decide, and then they're going to be using they're going to let us be the guinea pigs and then adopt what works, and if it doesn't work, they're going to be a little bit behind us, but expect, as Catherine said, expect similar. It's going to be similar. They are thinking of it the same way we're thinking of it. So, and then the smaller can hatch or something like that. We have no idea, really. Yeah.
So at this point in time, where would we go to find out who would we contact in the specific area we lived in? Like, we live in Chamberino.
I don't believe that Chamberino is incorporated, is that correct?
No.
It's
No.
not. So you would contact Doñana County, and Christina Ainsworth is the director there. Janine Divyak is also a good resource. She is, I believe, chief planner. So either one of those two could probably, at least if they can't answer it, direct you to the person who's working on those regulations.
Okay, thank you. Do you have to be a resident of the state to apply for a license?
This is Tim Pitts. I believe so. We're getting someone saying yes. I think that's right, but that's a CCD rule. It's not our rule. So if CCD would give you a license, we'd give you a business registration in the city. But CCD is, and I think the answer is correct over here, that it's a no.
I heard that you have a different definition for micro-business, so if you could expound on that. And then the follow-up question on that is, am I correct in hearing that your single-family residences, that if you wanted to have a micro-business, the state definition, that it has to be indoors, it couldn't be an outdoor grow?
So thanks for that question. So I want to be clear. So the state defined micro-business. They have the micro-business producer, and then they have the vertically integrated micro-business. Those would be allowed throughout the city, in the commercial zones, potentially in those infill development areas that I had discussed, and as a cottage industry. So there are lots of opportunities. The micro-business definition that we're including is very similar to that for those single-family rural residential zones. Basically, what we've done is those zones are intended to have some level of agriculture on them. There's a very similar rule about breweries and wineries in those zones. So if I live in a house and I wanted to grow a vineyard and then I wanted to produce my own wine, I could apply for a special use permit to have a winery, so there's a tasting room there. This would be a similar type of thing. It's similar to the state rules. 200 plants are the limit. Specific to those locations. The state, like I had indicated before, the state-defined micro-business could be located in all the other commercial zones and what have you. This is a little bit different. This is really specifically intended to be primarily a single-family home, and this is just something that you do at your home. You're growing, you're producing, and then you're able to have a small retail element to that. But yes, fully enclosed, because the intent, that the primary use on site is not cannabis. The primary use on site is a single family home, and we have to consider that everyone else around you is also a single family home, if that makes sense.
Outdoor grow at a single family home residence is, an outdoor grow would be precluded.
So to be very, very clear, for personal growth, We do not have any regulations regarding personal grow. That's something different, but yeah, for these smaller grow areas, we want to see that those were enclosed in some sort of greenhouse or type.
And it would have to be a separate building than the single-family residence?
That's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Joel. So I had a quick question, actually two-part question. One, water rights. So commercial water rights in the city, as far as I'm concerned, and can you tell me if this is correct? If you're hooking up to city utilities for water, as long as you're showing that you're paying and you're paying customer, you're good on commercial water rights for production?
That's correct. The city will sell you water at the normal rate.
Perfect. The second question is kind of relates to zoning and the cottage industry. So I'm familiar with breweries and manufacturing small scale like that. Distilleries, I know Mesilla has theirs over there. And that you are going to have a slightly separate definition for businesses that can be in those from what the state would for their micro businesses. I guess my question is, what is the limit for a cottage industry and production-wise specifically, not necessarily manufacturing?
Sure. Just to be clear, our micro business definition is only specific for those single-family residential zones that I had described. The state's definition for micro business applies elsewhere in the city. And so cottage industry could accommodate the state's defined micro business, which is limited to 200 plants.
And it would not be anything beyond that? I'm just wondering, because I have several properties, investments in properties, and just the way I wanted to do it may not work with how the city zoning is going. So I was just wanted a more clear definition of what could be grown in cottage industries or C2 specifically.
Yeah, so the cottage industry, if we were to apply that to the cannabis microbusiness, limited to the 200 plants, I think when you go beyond that, I think from a staff perspective, from a land use perspective, you're outgrowing that site, and it's with any business. It's not just cannabis. It could, like I used the salsa guy previously. So if there was a salsa maker and they were producing small scale and then had the retail component attached to it, but it got so big that now they're distributing and they're shipping, and it's really beyond what it was intended for, then you've outgrown that site and then it needs to go into a different zoning category. So it would be similar to that. It is a judgment call, but we do that every single day with land use.
So, and just a final comment on this, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what a plant is, what can be grown, different sizes. A lot of times people just think a marijuana plant or a cannabis plant is huge monstrosity, but there's 1,000 different ways to grow, more than one way to skin a cat. So the idea of limiting per plant and not necessarily per square footage is something that I personally think should be considered.
If I may, I'll comment on that, Tim Pitts. That's the state definition. We have not proposed to City Council anything that differs from state definitions. We didn't feel, to us it was, we didn't come up with the rules. We are just simply enforcing them in the city. So you may be right, but that's how the state's regulating it, and so that's what we chose to do. Obviously, again, City Council can choose to do something else, but that's why we did. I'm not going to disagree with your statement. I think that probably is correct, what you're saying, but unfortunately, that's not the regime we have to enforce. And then I would make one other comment, and that is, if you have property, like you're mentioning, and you're unsure, I would recommend, especially once the rules are adopted, once the ordinance is adopted, we have a planner of the day, again, right across the hall here. Come in, take a look at it, discuss with them, what are my options, what can I do? I think it would be a better thing for us for you to know up front instead of you just trying to have to decipher everything. That's what that person's there for. Okay?
Hi, my name's Karina. I kind of wanted to address something as far as the zoning goes in youth. I think zoning for marijuana should be no different than your zoning for liquor. If you can buy liquor in a gas station, the issue isn't so much that the youth can obtain it. The issue is that there's not a lot for the youth to do here. So maybe with the funds that are created through this program, they'll be able to have like a community center open up. But as far as zoning, I don't think this should be treated any different than liquor. No one here, I don't believe, is asking for it to be sold in Walmart or Walgreens, where we can all buy liquor. But a dispensary shouldn't have to deal with harder or make it more complicated to do what they're built to do. So I just think that, I think we should also address the mental health if we're gonna do the youth and, you know, as far as drug abuse and stuff like that. But I think as far as zoning, alcohol's a huge issue in New Mexico. A huge issue in New Mexico. We have places in New Mexico that have burial sites just based on the DUIs in this state. I don't think we should put stricter, you know, restrictions on this business because it's gonna hurt the people here who wanna create a business too.
Where does the 300-foot buffer from residential and 1,000-foot buffer from other cannabis businesses come from?
So that's a really good question. Part of what the state allowed us to do was to make some determinations on density. And so we were just looking at some maybe similar buffers that were at least familiar to us within the code. And so 1,000 feet was selected simply because we have another use that has 1,000-foot buffer. While it's not a like use, and I will admittedly say it's not a like use, it was familiar and it was a place to start. The 300-foot buffer, again, using similar buffers that we have for alcohol and for other things, is where the 300-foot buffer came from. We have a number of buffers in the city related to things of various sorts. Of course, cannabis is entirely different than those, but that's where that come from. That's where that came from. And of course, at this point in time, staff is making some considerations for all the input that we've received and making some recommendations to City Council regarding maybe some opportunities to modify those.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, shoot, I thought he was going to talk first. I just wanted to make a comment real quick. Thank you for being here to represent our youth and being concerned about illegal use of substances. We all know we can walk into any high school, junior high in the area, and unfortunately get things that we wouldn't like to get. When we look at clinical trial data, I spent my entire career in the pharmaceutical biotech industry, and when you see clinical trial data or you see trials come out that state a certain amount of information, I just ask you to go a little bit deeper. Look at the validity of that trial. There is really solid evidence right now that shows that those states where marijuana is legal, the opioid use has dramatically declined for various reasons. We're not going to get into that discussion. But the lady that left earlier with some concerns, we have a mental health crisis in this country that leads to a drug crisis. And I think a lot of us here are trying to be a solution to a problem, not create a bigger problem. And a lot of us, and I know from talking to people, we're not only here to sell a product to make an income, we're also wanting to give back and subsidize research and make sure that we know as much as we can about this compound. So I just want to say thank you to everyone here and just kind of encouraging everyone to get together as we bring the substance into the community of Las Cruces and into the state of New Mexico. And let's look at this and how we can solve problems with what we're doing, not create more problems. And that's just the challenge that I would like to ask, everyone to consider.
Good evening. I'm a real estate broker and developer, and of course I'm getting my phone rings off the hook daily ever since the legislation passed. Some of the things that people are asking, specifically in the industrial production areas that have traditionally not been a burden on water and electric resources, is now those areas have the potential of being exponentially compounded, and the demand for use of those resources. People are wondering, are their commercial water rate structures going to change? And B, is the infrastructure prepared to handle that? And then my other second question is, and I was up in Albuquerque last week discussing this, the 300-foot buffer, is that door to door or property line? So if you have, a half-acre lot and 2 half-acre lots, and the buildings are 1,000 feet apart, but the lot line puts them at 300 or less, is that going to be a factor, or are you going to go door to door on your 300-foot buffer?
Catherine, you answer that one first, then I'll answer the first.
I'll answer the buffer question. So if we're talking about schools, for example, the edge of the school is the property line. But let's say you have a cannabis business that's in a shopping center. We're going to count the door of that cannabis business to the property line of the school, if that makes any sense.
And then on the issue about water, I think you may underestimate how much water some of our commercial industrial uses use. The Saputo Dairy might be our biggest utility customer in the city, and it's out on the West Mesa, and we have zero problem providing them with water. I have been assured by our water administrator at the utilities that we can handle the water requirements. I would, if I were to be opening a business, I would probably speak to utilities before, just as my due diligence, and make sure and have them kind of confirm that for you, because I'm not sure I would take my word for it if I were you, but I definitely would get that confirmation. But I can tell you that we have had those conversations internally, and we've been told that utilities does not believe they have any problems supporting the expected industry in Las Cruces.
Hello, my name is Glenn. I'm a hopeful participant in the future cannabis industry here. I had a couple of questions. The property line buffer was one of them, if it's a property line or building to building, so I support a little bit more in-depth explanation on that. The other, I did have a question about the CCD reps here in Doña Ana County, and I did hear that you said they were planning on putting 2 people in place on that. My question is, do we have a timeline on those 2 people being placed in that? And would those people be when you read the regulations, when they say, to consult with your local jurisdiction, would those people be representing our local jurisdiction?
So to sort of answer that last question, and maybe I'll let Catherine go back and handle the buffer question again. We are your local jurisdiction, the staff you're seeing here. So if it says local jurisdiction, it's referring to City Hall and the staff that you're seeing in front of you. When it's talking about, I don't know if you're familiar with dealing, I believe, and again, until CCD is properly funded by the legislature, which it is not yet. So until it is properly funded, we don't necessarily know exactly how that's going to work. But our discussions seem to sound like it would be more similar to alcohol control. the way we have a local guy who, you know, if you sell alcohol in Las Cruces, you know him, and he comes to your thing, and if there's a sting operation, he's the one that organizes it, and all of that. You will know if you're selling cannabis in Las Cruces, you will know these people because they're going to be the ones that come out and, hey, what are you doing? It doesn't look like what you were approved for, and so on. So I think that's my expectation.
Sure.
That's pretty much how RLD operates in most of their divisions. That's my expectation. I'm no expert, and they don't have it worked out yet.
And just defining differentiation, so Doñana County would have its local jurisdiction expert, which would be separate or different than the city of Las Cruces local jurisdiction expert?
The local jurisdiction that is Doñana County is, so if it's a local jurisdiction issue, which is usually a zoning issue or something about hours of operation or those types of things, that time, place, and manner control, those things will be enforced by, if it's inside the city of Las Cruces boundaries, it'll be enforced by the police department or via, building or fire inspection or business registration. But this group, if you're in Doñana County, it will be either the sheriff's department or it'll be the community development department in Doñana County. The person at CCD should be the same for all of us.
Okay.
So that's, and again, my expectation.
Sure.
Linda could probably tell me, Tim, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about.
No, and I understand, and regulations aren't in concrete yet. And one of my last questions I have, social equity programs. We've always been supportive of social equity programs. Who would I talk to or be directed to talk to with those kinds of questions?
Connie, do you want to handle that? I don't know.
Connie Tomopiao, Assistant City Manager. Great question. For social equity, that is something that we're going to need time to discuss. The funding, there's the excise tax that's going to the state, excise tax that's going locally. And I know there's discussions, I know City Council, this is going to come before City Council soon enough, where they're going to talk about what are the goals that they have to do with the excise tax that goes locally from cannabis. And this is where the discussion is going to come right now. So I think you're looking at the group, but City Council will definitely be a group that will be of interest as there's community partners that I'm sure they are aware of that can help and assist, but also staff as well as we continue to get closer to appropriating those funds with direction from City Council.
And just to be clear, I am representing someone who would like to assist and help with that, not looking for help with that. So thank you, and I appreciate your guys' time. The slide presentation, will that be available as well? That's available?
Yes, we'll make that available. Jamie, can we put that on the website after?
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Just to clarify on a couple of the buffer questions that have come up, something to note, the way the language is drafted right now, there's several buffers that we're talking about, but specifically the buffer between a residential zone and the use, it's the edge of the defined zoning district, not somebody's house, for example. And we have very clear, geographic locations for those. Just so from the use, the cannabis use, to the zoning district when we're talking about that, it's not to because the school's an entirely different ballgame.
How you doing? My name is Otis Parkinson. I have an entertainment company local here, and I just wanted to know who would I speak to if I wanted to help the city, because I deal with a lot of celebrities, football players, directors, and I know for this to make sense for everybody, we have to generate money that's going to go to different programs that we're speaking about. And my second question, who do I speak to? But on my second question, law firm, is there a law firm that you guys know here that we can deal with a cannabis lawyer that also keep us in guidelines, you know? Is there particular-
Tim Pitts, I'll answer the second question first, and then I'll address the other one over to Irene. We don't have a particular law firm that we can recommend. It's not appropriate for the city to pick and choose professionals of saying who's there, but I'm pretty sure that you could probably get more help from LIDN's members than you will from us on who's a good lawyer in town for handling, for understanding your rights and under cannabis. And then I'd like to turn it over to Irene to answer the question about who can he talk to help any sort of programming or
I have a lot of celebrities, and a lot of these celebrities right now, especially the ones that are retired, you know, they're put a lot of their business interests and self-awareness. And for the lady that was speaking about the pill epidemic, she's absolutely right. You know, the more educated we get as far as the medical or the cannabis, you know, it will help some of these young kids to steer away and, you know, not necessarily come to cannabis, but just to get them away from the pill crisis, you know.
Irene Barra, Economic Development. I think that might, if I'm not mistaken, be tied to some of the social equity programming that we spoke about earlier. But we'd be happy to sit down to discuss in detail maybe some of those individuals and programming that you're interested in connecting us with. Absolutely.
yeah, so Irene will be your, yeah.
It sounded like it was answered twice before, but I just wanted to clarify one more time. There's not going to be any restrictions or changes to commercial water use as far as it comes to production within the city limits?
There is no plan to do that. There are regular reviews of rates and so on, but they would apply equally across the board.
Anybody has more questions?
Okay, I think we'll take one more. Carla, in the back.
Randy Estrada. I have one more question about something that was still not touched on, or it was for a moment, but that's the consumption area and its use. And as I've understood it from previous council meetings and these talks, is that we were implementing a use where if tobacco is there, that's accepted, that cannabis would also be accepted there in hotel, casino areas and things like that, but also continuing with the Clean Air Act, how that functions. And then my concern right now is that we're pushing towards an indoor-only model. That seems a bit odd.
So if I could answer a portion of that. So there are licensed consumption areas, which is one thing, and then there's personal consumption. So for example, if you grew your own plants at home and you wanted to do personal consumption, they're slightly different.
No, I'm not talking about residential. I mean, in a business sense, like bars and things like that, with
Sure.
open air smoking areas.
Sure. So there's personal consumption and then there's licensed consumption. So for example, a bar can't be licensed for cannabis as well, but it's a little unclear to us that if you were just had a personal, say you went out and purchased something and wanted to consume at a bar, but the bar is not selling that to you. That's a state regulatory issue, and I'm really not quite sure how that's going to work. I'm going to look to Connie to see if he can answer that.
Are we talking about the clean, the locations for the where tobacco?
Well, basically, if somebody wanted to smoke in a bar, could they?
Yeah, there's I would refer back to the Clean Indoor Smoking Act, and wherever it's aligned right now in legislation where it says you're allowed to smoke, As you mentioned, you will be allowed to smoke in the city. We can't stop that. Now, our purview and our authority as a local jurisdiction is we are able, when it comes to the license portion of the consumption areas, that is the portion that we are, as you mentioned, we are coming and recommending to City Council that we just, in this stage right now, allow indoor but ban outdoor consumption. And I think what you're asking is, why don't we just align them and just allow everything?
More just a clarification, because I know we're jumping into a new area, and like we've had questions about how to function, the difference between your personal use crop versus are you doing a micro business, and how that affects your plant counts. I understand that, but I also wonder about how it is with just enforcement with the law. I understand we had the community outreach officer here, and she explained it's more of a just like, hey man, like let's not do this publicly. But I also wonder about like Whiskey Dick's has a patio. You can smoke cigarettes, you can smoke vape. Can you smoke there? I know we get to that. Then we get back to the other open air smoking areas. We're in the patios of different places. They have clear labeling on what is smoking and non-smoking. I'm just asking what kind of protection is there for the citizenry, the general knowledge on things like that? It is stated in the bill that it is protected under those places, but I'm just wondering like how it is that we're touching that.
What was that? What was that last part? You're just thinking?
How it is that the city is, because we do time, use, and time, place, and manner. So that's what I'm like, is that where we're defining personal use versus what you can do out and about?
So, did you want to take this, Kathy?
So I think we need to be clear. So there is a difference between licensed consumption areas associated with those with cannabis retail, right? And that's one thing. And so we can control that. Yes, those are indoor, or we can say no, we don't want those associated with retail, or what have you. And then there's the issue related to, can you smoke a cannabis cigarette in public? I think that's something that the state is controlling, but as I understand it, and how we've all read the act, that if it's allowed by the state's Clean Air Act, then it's allowed. I don't believe that you could just walk down the sidewalk and smoke marijuana, similar to I can't go outside and drink a beer on the sidewalk either. So that's how we understand that it's being applied. So if an individual business, say a casino, says yes, you can smoke a cannabis cigarette, then I believe that's probably just fine. But that's not something that we, from a zoning perspective, are regulating at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no, thank you, appreciate it. And it's a little after 7. We just want to thank everybody for your time right now. And if there's no more questions, we'll see you all next time. This will come from City Council for a first read on Monday. Thank you.